stared at my phone and read the comment again because my brain refused to accept it the first time. Aunt Susan, go back to Facebook. The words sat under my post like they belonged there, like they had always been waiting for me. My cheeks burned so fast, it felt like I had been slapped in public. The train rocked beneath me, metal on metal, and I held the phone closer, as if that could hide it from the strangers around me. I refreshed the screen. The comments stayed. Another one appeared, colder, karma whore. I kept my face still, but my throat tightened, and my ears rang with the noise of the carriage. I looked up for a second and saw normal people, normal bags, normal tired eyes, and I felt like the only person in England who had done something shameful. Then I looked back down and watched the little red numbers by my name change, as if my value was a dial someone else could turn. I refreshed again. My post had climbed. A few upvotes. Then it slowed, and the downvotes started to nibble at it. The screen became a scoreboard, and I became the kind of person who sat on a morning train counting points. I hated that I cared, and I cared more with every refresh. The insulting comments did not even match the tone of what I had posted. I had not attacked anyone. I had not argued. I had just posted again and again, trying to learn what people liked. My fingers hovered over the reply box. I wanted to type something sharp and clean, something that would put them back in their place. But I knew how it worked. If I replied angry, they would laugh. If I explained myself, they would call it an excuse. If I stayed silent, it would look like I agreed. The worst part was that I had no idea who these people were. They could have been children. They could have been grown men at work. They could have been someone sitting 2 seats away from me, watching me pretend I was not being hurt by a phone screen. Another refresh. Someone wrote, "Stay on your side of the pond." That one landed differently. It was not just an insult. It was a door slammed in my face. I had joined a website, not a country club. I had not moved anywhere. I had not taken anything. Yet here I was being told by strangers that I did not belong in the same space as them. I could almost hear the voice behind it, not loud, not emotional, just certain. I scrolled up to my profile like I was checking bruises on my own skin. There were the posts, lined up like footprints. Too many, too close together. I saw myself through their eyes for the first time, a new name appearing again and again. A person who always had something to say. A person who always wanted a reaction. I had told myself it was harmless because it was a game. A challenge, a bit of fun. But the pattern looked obsessive when it was displayed in a neat list with timestamps. The train stopped at a station and people pushed past my knees, and the movement made me tuck the phone down for a moment. My reflection in the dark window looked calm, almost bored, but my hands shook when I brought the screen back up. I checked the karma number again. It was higher than yesterday. That should have made me pleased. Instead, it made me feel trapped, like I had stepped onto a path, and now strangers were lining the sides, judging every step and shouting names at me as I passed. I thought about quitting right there, deleting everything, going back to being invisible online, the way I had been my whole life without even trying. The idea brought relief for half a second. Then the other feeling rose up behind it, hotter. The stubborn part of me that had accepted the bet in the first place. The part that hated being laughed at. The part that wanted to prove I could learn the rules of any room, even a room full of people who did not want me in it. And then, like a bad joke with perfect timing, my mind replayed the beginning of this mess. An American voice, confident and teasing, telling me I would never catch his karma. The prize he had named so casually, like it was nothing. Canada. A place I had pictured in my head for years, wide and cold and beautiful. I had said yes too quickly. I had smiled like it was just banter. It had felt safe because it was between friends. This started as a joke between friends, but it did not stay a joke. I stared at Aunt Susan again and felt something shift. It was not only embarrassment now, it was a warning. In 3 weeks, I had gone from a quiet commuter killing time on a train to a target with a nickname, and I did not even know what rule I had broken. I held the phone tighter, watching the comments multiply, and I could not stop thinking one question. What had I done in just 3 weeks that made strangers decide I did not belong here at all? Before Reddit, my life had felt like it had been built to avoid notice. Work, train, repeat. The same platform, the same carriage, the same seats I chose without thinking. I had liked it that way because routine never asked questions, and it never laughed at you when you got something wrong. The train commute had been my quiet shield. In the mornings, I had watched faces slide past like pages in a book I never had to read out loud. People had talked into phones, argued softly, laughed too brightly. I had stayed small. I had kept my eyes down and my thoughts inside, because that had always been safer than becoming the kind of person strangers remembered. I had been reserved in the simple ways. I had not posted much online. I had not taken selfies. I had not joined loud conversations at work unless I had to. Even in groups of friends, I had been the one who listened, the one who nodded, the one who smiled at the right times. Attention had felt like a spotlight, and I had learned early that a spotlight did not only show you. It invited people to judge you. There had been a comfort in being predictable. When every day matched the last, nothing could surprise you. If I sat by the window, I could pretend the world outside mattered more than the world inside my head. Fields, rows of houses, gray roads, wet trees. England had been good at looking calm, even when it was not. I had used that. I had let the weather be an excuse to keep my feelings quiet. But calm had a cost. On the train, I had sometimes caught myself staring at posters for holidays I never booked. Mountains, lakes, wide skis, places with names that sounded like a different version of my life. I had not told anyone how often I pictured standing somewhere far away, somewhere that did not know me, where I could make a mistake without it becoming a story people repeated. I had hated admitting that part. Wanting more had sounded ungrateful, like an insult to the life I already had. So I had swallowed it and called it daydreaming. I had told myself that steady was enough, that being safe was the same as being happy. I had repeated that thought like a rule, and over time it had started to feel true. Even my evenings had been arranged to stay quiet. I had gone to the same places, spoken to the same people, kept conversations light. I had enjoyed the feeling of walking into a familiar room and knowing what would happen next. No sudden changes, no surprises, no reason for anyone to look at me too long. And yet, something had still pressed at the edges. A restlessness that did not fit the neat shape of my schedule. It had shown up in small ways, like the moment before I got off the train, when I felt a strange disappointment that the day was starting exactly the way it always started. Or the moment I went to bed, when I realized I could name every part of tomorrow without even trying. I had not been unhappy. That was the problem. It was hard to justify wanting different when nothing was technically wrong. I had had a job. I had paid rent. I had had people I could text if I needed to. The world had not demanded much from me, and I had returned the favor by staying quiet and polite and careful. So when something new appeared, I had noticed it like a crack in glass. It had not been dramatic at first. It had been a simple detail that did not match the room, a voice that did not sound like the others, a presence that made my brain lift its head and pay attention. It had happened in my local pub, the one place I went often enough to feel invisible. One ordinary night, the door had opened and someone different walked in. He stood out the moment he walked into the pub, not because he was loud, but because he did not move like he was trying to blend in. Most people in my town entered with their shoulders slightly drawn in, like they expected to apologize for taking up space. He did the opposite. He looked around as if the room belonged to everyone equally, then smiled at the bar staff like he had known them for years. I noticed his accent before I noticed anything else. It cut through the soft English voices and the careful jokes. American. Not the kind you only heard on television, but real and close, with a confidence that felt almost rude in a quiet room. He asked for a drink and chatted with the bartender while he waited, like time was a friend instead of a threat. People glanced at him and then looked away. I did the same, but I kept glancing back. There was something odd about him that I could not name at first. It was not his clothes or his face. It was how easily he laughed, how quickly he filled the small silences that everyone else respected. In that pub, silence was normal. Silence meant you belonged. He treated silence like a mistake he had to fix, and somehow it worked. The bartender laughed. Someone 2 stools away replied to him. The room shifted a little, like a window had been opened. He sat alone at first. I sat with my usual drink and my usual habit of not talking to strangers. But I kept listening. He spoke to people as if he expected them to be interesting. That expectation was powerful. It pulled words out of them. Even the regulars, who normally stayed in their own circles, gave him stories. He said he had recently arrived in England. He said it like it was an adventure, not a disruption. I told myself I was only curious because he was new. That was the safe explanation. The truth was that his confidence made me uncomfortable in a way that also felt exciting. I had spent years making myself quiet. He made noise without permission and did not seem ashamed. Part of me wanted to judge him for it. Another part wanted to stand closer just to feel what that was like. The first time we spoke, it happened by accident. I went to the bar at the same time as him, and he turned and asked a simple question about the town. Not a polite question to fill space. A real one, like he actually wanted the answer. I gave him the shortest reply I could manage, and he thanked me like I had done him a favor. Then he asked another question, then another. Each time, I expected the conversation to end, and each time he kept it alive with calm persistence. He introduced himself, but later, I kept thinking of him as Mr. X, like a character who had walked into a story that was not his. He had a way of sharing small details about himself without forcing them, like he was laying out pieces on a table and letting you choose what to look at. He said he missed certain foods. He said he did not understand why English people queued so quietly. He said he liked the pub because it felt like a living room that belonged to the town. I did not become his friend that night. I went home and told myself it was nothing. Still, I returned to the pub the next week, and he was there again. He recognized me. That should not have mattered, but it did. I had been used to being forgettable. He said my name like it mattered, that he got it right. I felt my face warm, and I hated how easily that small attention affected me. Over the next months, our conversations became a pattern. At first, they stayed in safe places. Work, weather, travel, differences between England and America. He teased me about how careful I was with my words. I teased him about how he spoke to strangers like they were old friends. The contrast should have pushed us apart. Instead, it made a strange balance. When he talked too much, I grounded him. When I shut down, he pulled me back out. I noticed that he listened differently than most people. Not like he was waiting to speak next. He listened like he was collecting information because he actually cared. That was rare. It made me say things I normally kept hidden, like how the train commute made my days feel identical, or how I sometimes felt like my life was shrinking around me. He did not laugh. He did not try to fix it. He just nodded and treated my feelings like they were real. A year passed before I admitted, even to myself, that he had become the person I spoke to first when something happened. Good or bad, it was not romance. It was not a secret crush. It was something simpler and, in some ways, more dangerous. Trust. The kind that made you lower your guard without noticing. The kind that made you believe you could take a risk because someone would catch you if you fell. A year of friendship built the trust that made the bet possible, even though I did not know that yet. At the time, it only meant that his messages could change my mood in seconds, and his opinion mattered more than I wanted to admit. One night, after we had talked longer than usual, he leaned in like he was about to share a joke. He told me there was a whole world online that I had never used, and he said it like he was opening a door on purpose. He called it Reddit. He said the word Reddit like it was obvious, like everyone already knew it, and I was the last person on earth to catch up. I had heard of it in a vague way, the same way I had heard of 1,000 online things that never touched my life. He leaned back in his seat at the pub and watched my face while he explained, enjoying my confusion. He told me it was made of communities. He called them subreddits. He said you could talk about almost anything if you found the right place. He said you could be anonymous and still have a reputation. That last part caught my attention in a way I did not expect. Anonymous but known. Invisible but counted. It sounded safe and dangerous at the same time. Then he showed me his phone. He had an account that looked old and lived in. It had a history, little badges, posts with hundreds or thousands of upvotes. I did not understand what I was looking at, but I understood the confidence behind it. He scrolled like he owned the space. He pointed at a number near his name and said, very casually, that it was his karma. I asked what karma meant, and he smiled as if he had been waiting for that question. He explained it like a game score. People upvoted what they liked, downvoted what they did not. The karma number went up and down, and according to him, it mattered and did not matter at the same time. That contradiction sounded like the internet, so I believed him. I watched him flick through comments, fast and comfortable. People argued. People joked. People praised and mocked each other without restraint. It looked loud, but it also looked alive. My life had been quiet for so long that loudness felt like color. He asked if I wanted to make an account. I almost said no out of habit. No was my default setting. No meant nothing could go wrong. But he was sitting there with that American ease, making it sound simple. Just sign up. Just read. Just try it. And there was something else, something I did not want to admit. I liked being invited into a world by someone who already knew the way around. So I said yes. He helped me download the app. He talked me through the basics with patience that felt half real and half entertained. When I hesitated over choosing a username, he laughed and told me not to overthink it. That made me more stubborn, not less. I chose something plain, something that did not scream for attention. Even then, I had still been trying to stay small. When I finally had an account, he asked me to look at my profile. It was empty, like a new notebook. No posts, no comments, no karma, just a blank space waiting for me to write something into it. I felt the strange pressure of it, like the internet was starring back. Mr. X lifted his drink and said, in the same tone he used when he teased me about my careful English manners, that I would never catch him. I asked what he meant. He turned his phone screen back to me and tapped his karma number again. He said it would take me forever to reach it. He said I would get bored. He said I would post something awkward and disappear. He was smiling, but it was a smug smile. Not cruel, not mean, just certain, like he could already see me losing. That smile hit a part of me I usually kept locked away. The quiet, competitive part that had lived under my reserved surface for years. I did not show it often because it never seemed worth the risk, but I felt it wake up, sharp and hot, like a match struck in the dark. I told him I could learn. He raised his eyebrows. He asked how badly I wanted to prove it. I shrugged like I did not care, but my pulse had already changed. He noticed. He leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice like he was offering a deal in a film. He said if I matched his karma, he would take me to Canada. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Canada was not a casual word to me. It was a place I had imagined in fragments for years. Wide forests, clean, cold air, big distances, a different version of life. I had never been west, not really. My travel had stayed close and sensible, the way my life stayed close and sensible. He said he had wanted to go back anyway. He said it would be more fun with me. He said it like it was nothing, like a plane ticket was a joke you could toss across a table. I tried to laugh it off, but my mind had already started counting. Not money, not days off work, something else. The distance between my routine and a dream. He had placed it right there, close enough to touch, but only if I won. I asked what happened if I lost. He grinned wider and said nothing serious, just bragging rights. He would get to tease me forever. He would get to call me predictable. Predictable. That word sat in my chest like a weight. I had spent my whole life trying to make predictable feel safe. I suddenly hated it. I told him I accepted. He lifted his glass again, pleased with himself, and we clinked drinks like it was harmless. Like it was a pub bet about a football match. Like it was not a number that could crawl into my head and start rearranging my thoughts. On the train home that night, I opened Reddit and stared at the blank feed, feeling both excited and stupid. I told myself I would browse first. I told myself I would take it slow. I told myself it was just a game. But one grin, one bet, one number to chase had already changed the shape of my attention. 3 weeks later, I was no longer browsing. I was posting nonstop. I treated Reddit like a machine with a hidden lever. If I pulled the right way, a number went up, and Canada moved closer. If I pulled wrong, the number dropped, and I felt stupid for caring. I told myself it was only curiosity, only learning, but I checked my karma the way people checked the time when they were late and pretending they were not. At first, I posted whatever came to mind because I did not know what else to do. A small story, an opinion, a question, something I thought was funny, something I thought was useful. I threw words into different places and waited to see if they sank or floated. When nothing happened, I felt exposed, like I had spoken into a room and everyone had chosen to ignore me. The first time a post got real upvotes, I felt a rush so sharp it scared me. It was not just happiness. It was relief, proof that I could be seen without being rejected. I watched the number climb in small jumps, and each jump felt like a little door opening. My body reacted before my mind could judge it. My heart beat faster. My shoulders tightened. I smiled at my phone on the train and then stopped myself because smiling at a screen in public felt like a confession. I messaged Mr. X that my karma had moved, trying to sound casual. He replied with a laughing tone and a comment about beginner luck. He told me not to get cocky. He said he had been on there for years. That should have cooled me down. Instead, it made me more focused. I did not want luck. I wanted skill. I wanted to beat him in a way that could not be dismissed. So I began to experiment. I started paying attention to the timing. I posted at different hours and watched what happened. I tried short posts and longer ones. I tried being direct. I tried being polite. I tried being emotional and then tried being neutral. When something worked, I tried to repeat it like a formula. When it failed, I stared at the screen as if the answer was hidden between the lines. It felt strange because offline I had spent years avoiding attention, and now I chased it on purpose. In person, I had been the quiet woman on the train with her headphones in. Online, I became someone who kept appearing, again and again, as if I had always belonged there. The contrast made me feel split in two. One half of me cringed at the other half. The other half did not care as long as the karma went up. Each post felt like a new attempt to crack the code. I learned quickly that Reddit did not reward what I thought was good. It rewarded what a crowd wanted at that moment. Sometimes, a simple comment got more points than something I had written carefully. Sometimes, the safest joke got applause, while anything honest sat there with one upvote and a silence that felt personal. That randomness made me chase harder. If it was unpredictable, then I had to post more to increase my chances. That was the logic I used, and it sounded reasonable in my own head. I began checking the app in all the small gaps of my day, between stops on the train, while waiting for the kettle, while walking from one room to another. I told myself I was only looking for a second, but seconds stacked up into minutes, and minutes stacked up into a habit. I started thinking in posts. When something happened, my brain framed it like content. Would this fit here? Would people react? Would it get points? The most unsettling part was how quickly my mood attached itself to a number. If karma rose, I felt light and capable. If it stalled, I felt tense and restless. If it dropped, I felt embarrassed even though nobody in my real life could see it. I caught myself sitting on the train with my jaw clenched, refreshing the screen like I could force strangers to approve of me through willpower alone. At night, I lay in bed and replayed my own comments, wondering if I sounded wrong, wondering if I had missed some rule everyone else knew. I read other people's posts like a student copying the top scorer. I looked at what they wrote, how they wrote it, how they ended it. I began to see patterns and then doubted them. One day, honesty seemed loved. The next day, it got mocked. One day, a question got help. The next day, it got sarcasm. The platform felt alive in a way that was exciting, but also cruel, because it changed its face without warning. I kept pushing because the bet sat behind everything like a clock ticking. Mr. X did not pressure me directly, but he did not let me forget either. He asked, once in a while, how my little karma adventure went. He sent screenshots of his own number like a playful threat. Every time he did, my competitive spark flared again, and I felt that old fear of being predictable, of giving up, of proving him right. So I posted more. At first, the crowd did not feel like a crowd. It felt like separate people reacting in separate moments. A helpful comment here, a joke there, a small argument. It was manageable because it was scattered. But as my posting increased, I began to notice something else. Familiar usernames, familiar tones, people who remembered me from a different thread and carried their opinion of me into a new one. Then the reactions shifted. It started with small remarks that sounded like jokes. Someone asked if I ever slept. Someone said I was everywhere. Someone told me to slow down. I laughed it off, but I also posted again, almost immediately, as if I could prove I did not care by doing the exact thing they complained about. The first time someone accused me of farming, I did not even understand what they meant. I stared at the word like it was in a language I should have learned earlier. Then I looked at my own profile again and saw the same thing they saw. Post after post after post, like I was shaking a tin cup. I told myself I was just playing a game. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself nobody had the right to judge me for learning. But the more I posted, the more the crowd began to name me. And I could feel that name forming in the dark, getting ready to stick. At some point, I stopped checking Reddit for fun and started checking it to breathe. I opened the app the moment my train signal came back after a tunnel. I refreshed at red lights while walking. I refreshed in the lift at work. I refreshed so often that my thumb ached, and the ache felt normal, like part of the challenge. I told myself I was only being disciplined. I told myself athletes did not train by guessing. They measured, they adjusted, they tried again. But the truth showed up in my body before it showed up in my thoughts. When a post gained upvotes fast, my chest loosened and my face warmed with a quiet pride. When it slowed down, my stomach sank, as if I had made a mistake that someone important had seen. I began to wake up already thinking about my karma number, not my job, not my plans for the day. Just that number, sitting there like a judgment that could change at any second. If it went up, the day felt easier. If it went down, everything felt heavy, even the air in the train carriage. The strangest part was how private it was. Nobody around me knew I was losing and winning every few minutes. People saw the same quiet woman on the same train. They did not see the panic I felt when a post sat at 0, or the quick relief when it crawled to 1. They did not see me reading my own words again and again, trying to spot what had offended strangers I would never meet. Mr. X did not mean to make it worse, but he did. He stayed playful, and that playfulness carried an edge because he never seemed worried. He sent me screenshots of his own karma as if it was a joke trophy. He asked, in that light American way, how my little climb was going. He did not say it to be cruel, but it made me feel like I was standing at the bottom of a mountain while he leaned on the railing at the top. I started comparing myself to him even when he was not speaking. I looked at his account and saw years of posts, years of comfort, and I felt a sharp need to catch up fast. I did not want to be the friend who tried something new and failed in public. I did not want to be the predictable one who quit. The bet stopped being about Canada for a moment and became about pride. And then Canada came back into my mind like a flash of cold air. I pictured the trip in more detail than I should have. I pictured wide roads, a different skyline, a new feeling in my lungs. I pictured telling people I had gone. I pictured Mr. X beside me, impressed, forced to admit he had been wrong about me. That picture tightened its grip every time I thought about stopping. But the more I chased, the more I noticed something else in the comments. It was subtle at first, a change in tone, a hint of impatience. People started replying to me like I was a familiar annoyance. They did not respond to what I said. They responded to the fact that it was me again. I began to feel watched, not in a paranoid way, not like someone followed me in real life, but like my username had become a shape people recognized. I would post something harmless, and a comment would appear within minutes, not about the topic, but about me. How often I posted, how many subreddits I appeared in, how quickly I answered. The attention I had chased turned into a spotlight that did not feel warm anymore. That was when the shame started. A thin, sour feeling under everything. I imagined people scrolling past my name and rolling their eyes. I imagined them calling me desperate. I imagined them laughing at my profile the way people laughed at someone trying too hard at a party. I had never wanted to be that person. In real life, I avoided it with silence. Online, I had walked straight into it. So I began to justify myself in my own head over and over. It is just a game. It is just points. Nobody gets hurt. I am learning. Everyone starts somewhere. I repeated those lines like they were a shield. But the shield did not work because my behavior kept proving the opposite. If it was just a game, why did my hands shake when a post flopped? If it was just points, why did I feel anger when someone downvoted me? If nobody got hurt, why did I feel humiliated like I had been caught doing something dirty? The goal stayed the same, but the feeling changed. I stopped enjoying the communities and started seeing them like fields I had to cross. I looked for places where posts rose quickly. I watched what got rewarded and copied the shape of it. I posted more often when I should have posted less, because slowing down felt like falling behind. Every time I sensed disapproval, I tried to outrun it with another post, as if volume could drown out judgment. Then Mr. X asked me casually how close I was getting. I looked at my karma, then at his, and felt a hard drop in my stomach. The gap still existed. It was smaller, but it was real. I could almost hear his grin through the screen, not mean, just confident. I pictured him telling the story later. How I tried, how I got obsessed, how I could not catch him. That fear made me refresh again, and again, and again, until the motion felt like a compulsion instead of a choice. And then the comments stopped being annoyed and started being cruel. The first harsh word landed under one of my posts like a stone thrown at glass. And when I read it, I realized the crowd had already decided what I was. They just had not said it out loud yet. My phone buzzed while the train slowed into a station, and I looked down expecting a normal reply. I saw a new notification, then another, stacking so fast that the screen seemed to jump. For a second, I felt that old thrill. Activity meant points. Activity meant progress. I opened the first one, and my stomach tightened. It was not about what I had posted. It was about me. It said I was a karma whore. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. The carriage around me felt louder, like someone had turned up the volume. A man coughed. A child laughed. The train doors beeped. I held my phone closer, as if that would change what I was reading. I backed out and opened the next notification. Another person called me a karma farmer and told me to stop spamming. I did not even remember the post they were talking about. I had posted so much that the threads blended together. I clicked back into my profile, scrolling down through my own history, and it hit me like a cold wave. There was no gap, no breathing room. It looked frantic. It looked greedy. It looked like I had been shouting across the platform for attention. My chest felt tight, like the air had become thin. I read the comment again, then again, trying to decide if it was a joke. It did not read like a joke. It read like disgust. My phone buzzed again. I opened the next one with a knot in my throat. And this one was worse, because it sounded almost cheerful. It said, "Here comes Aunt Susan again. Go back to Facebook." Aunt Susan. I did not understand why that name landed so hard, but it did. It felt like a mask someone had forced onto my face. It was not even an insult I could argue with. It was a type, a stereotype. Someone older, out of touch, posting too much, trying too hard. Someone embarrassing. Someone people laughed at together. I looked up from my phone for a second, and the train window reflected my face back at me. Neutral, controlled, quiet. The same woman who never stood out. And yet my hands shook slightly around the phone. The difference between what I looked like and what I felt made me dizzy. I dropped my gaze back to the screen and saw more replies gathering under the thread. People started piling on. Some used the same words. Some got creative. One told me to stay on my side of the pond. Another said they could smell the desperation through the screen. Someone wrote that I was ruining the place. I scrolled and scrolled, chasing the start of it, trying to find the moment I had tipped from annoying to hated. The comments kept coming in, not just on that post, but on older ones too. It felt like people had clicked my profile and decided to go hunting. They left sharp little notes like they were tagging a wall. My throat went dry. I swallowed and it did nothing. I tapped into another thread where I had been feeling proud only hours earlier. I remembered thinking it had gone well. The upvotes had climbed at first. Now the top comment was not praise. It was a warning to others. Do not feed her. She is farming. Downvote and move on. My face went hot. Not anger, shame. The kind that made my skin feel too tight. I imagined hundreds of strangers reading my words and seeing only a motive, not a person, just a tactic. I locked my phone screen for half a second, as if I could stop it. Then I unlocked it again, because I could not help myself. The buzzing continued, and each vibration felt like a small hit to the ribs. I hovered over the delete button on one post, then another. My thumb paused above the screen. If I deleted everything, would it stop? Or would it prove them right? Would it look like guilt? The train lurched forward, and my balance shifted. I grabbed the seat edge with my free hand, trying not to look like I was panicking. People around me stared at their own screens, lost in their own worlds. Nobody noticed that my little private game had turned into a public trial. I opened my messages with Mr. X and stared at our last chat. He had sent a laughing line about how I was becoming a real Redditor now. He had no idea what was happening in real time. Part of me wanted to tell him immediately, to hand the mess back to the person who had brought me here. Another part of me felt protective of the bet, like admitting I was drowning would make me lose more than karma. It would make me lose face. More notifications appeared. One comment told me to stop posting and start reading. Another told me to go back to Facebook because Reddit was not for people like me. The phrase people like me sat there like a stain. I did not know what they meant exactly, but I could feel the shape of it. Outsider, tourist, someone who did not know the rules, someone who should stay quiet. I clicked into my profile again and stared at the overview like it belonged to someone else. In 3 weeks, I had gone from newcomer to target. That was the real shock. Not that one person disliked me, but that a crowd had formed a shared opinion so quickly, like my username had become a warning sign. My breathing turned shallow. I kept rereading the same insults, as if repetition would make them less real. It did the opposite. Each time I read Aunt Susan, it stuck harder. Each time I read Karma Whore, my stomach twisted like I had been caught doing something shameful in public. I looked at the number I had been chasing and realized I could not even enjoy it anymore. The points felt dirty. The higher it went, the more it seemed to prove the worst accusation, that I only wanted attention. My thumb hovered over the app icon like it was something that could bite me. I could quit. I could delete everything and vanish back into my quiet life. Or I could do the one thing I hated most, the one thing I had avoided my whole life. I could stand up in front of strangers and explain myself. The rest of that train ride felt longer than the whole week before it. I sat with my phone low in my lap, eyes fixed on the screen, reading the same insults until they stopped looking like words and started looking like facts. Karma whore, karma farmer, Aunt Susan. Each one felt like a hand pressing my face into something dirty. I tried to tell myself it was just strangers, just pixels, just noise. But my body did not care what my brain said. My throat stayed tight. My stomach stayed hollow. Every time the phone buzzed, I flinched like I had been called out by name in a crowded room. I clicked into my profile again and stared at the list of posts like it was evidence. I saw what they saw. I saw how often I had posted. I saw how I had hopped between communities, trying to find what worked. In my head, it had been training. On the screen, it looked like hunger. The shame turned into defensiveness. So fast, it scared me. Who were they to decide why I posted? Who were they to act like they owned the place? I had not hurt anyone. I had not lied. I had not stolen. I had just tried. I had just played the game the way it was built to be played. If upvotes did not matter, why did everyone guard them like territory? Then guilt followed right behind that anger, quiet and heavy, because I had been chasing it. I had been shaping myself to fit what strangers wanted. I had been watching the numbers like they were oxygen. I had been thinking about what to post before I even thought about what I felt. The comments had not invented that. They had just put a harsh name on it. I imagined the crowd as a single face, bored and annoyed, watching me pop up again and again. I imagined them pointing at my username like it was a joke everyone understood. I imagined the worst part, which was not being disliked. It was being dismissed, being reduced to a type, and then pushed aside. The internet did not just disagree. It tried to push me out. I looked around the carriage without really seeing it. People stared out of windows, scrolled through their own feeds, adjusted their coats. Ordinary life continued, calm and unaware. I felt like I had dirt on my skin that no one else could see. I wanted to go home and wash it off, but it was not that kind of dirt. It was a feeling. My thumb hovered over the delete button again. If I deleted my posts, the evidence would disappear, but the screenshots would still exist somewhere. The memory would still exist in the people who had already decided I was a joke. And if I deleted everything, what did that make me? Someone who ran. Someone who proved the crowd had power. I switched to my messages with Mr. X again, and my chest tightened for a different reason. I worried he would see it. I worried he would search my username, curious about my progress, and find the insults stacked under my posts like rotten fruit. I worried he would laugh. Not cruelly, but in that teasing way that would cut deeper because it came from someone I trusted. I worried he would feel embarrassed for me. I worried he would feel annoyed that his bet had made me look foolish. Then I worried about the opposite, that he would defend me, that he would step into the comments and argue with strangers, making it bigger making it uglier, turning my private shame into a public fight. I pictured his confident American voice clashing with the crowd, and I felt sick. I did not want to be rescued in front of everyone. I wanted to be competent. The worst thought kept circling back. Maybe I had broken rules I did not even know existed. Reddit had rules written on the screen, but it also had rules people carried in their tone. How often you should speak, how you should sound, when you should stop. I had walked into a room full of people who knew the rhythm, and I had started talking too loudly without realizing it. My mind tried to solve it like a puzzle. Post less, comment less, lurk more. But another part of me, the frantic part, wanted to do the opposite. Post something brilliant that would flip the mood. Post something funny that would make them like me again. Post something so normal and perfect that the labels would fall off. That impulse felt like an addiction. The pain made me want the very thing that caused the pain. I hated that about myself, and having it only made me more desperate to fix it. When the train finally reached my stop, I stepped onto the platform with my phone still in my hand, my heart still racing. I stood still while people flowed around me, and I realized I could not keep playing the game the same way. I could not keep pretending I was invisible while a crowd built a story about me in public. I had two options. I could stay silent and let the labels harden, or I could tell the truth in my own words before the internet finished numbing me. I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off except for the glow of my phone, and I stopped refreshing for the first time in days. My hands still moved like they expected another hit of notifications, but I forced them to stay still. I opened the place where you started a new post, and the empty text box looked like a cliff edge. I told myself I did not owe anyone an explanation. Then I remembered how it felt to be reduced to a joke, and I realized silence would not protect me. Silence would let other people finish the story for me. I started typing, deleted it, and started again. I kept my words simple on purpose. I knew the internet punished anything that sounded too dramatic. I wrote that I had been called names, and I did not blame anyone for being annoyed, but I wanted to explain what I had been doing and why. Even as I wrote that, my face burned with embarrassment. I could almost hear the replies before they arrived. Here comes the sob story. Here comes Aunt Susan with excuses. I typed anyway. I admitted I lived in England and rode the train every day. I wrote that my best friend was American and that he had introduced me to Reddit. I explained he had an established account and he was proud of it. I wrote that he had made a playful bet with me that I could not match his karma. I wrote the prize without dressing it up because it was the truth, and the truth sounded ridiculous even to me. If I matched his karma, he would take me to Canada. When I typed Canada, my throat tightened. That word had been fuel for weeks. It had turned a silly challenge into a real hunger. I wrote that I had never been west, never had a reason to chase something big for myself, and the bet had lit a competitive spark in me that I had not expected. Then I wrote the part that made my fingers shake. I admitted I had started posting all sorts of stuff to see what worked. I admitted I had treated it like training, like I could reverse engineer the taste of strangers. I wrote that I had been watching the numbers too closely and posting too often. I did not call it addiction, but I described the feeling of refreshing and refreshing until my mood depended on it. I wanted people to understand without giving them a word they could throw back at me. I paused, reread it, and felt sick. It sounded pathetic when it sat there in plain text. Not evil, not malicious, just desperate. I understood in that moment why the crowd had reacted the way it did. It did not make the insults fair, but it made them make sense. I kept going. I named the labels I had seen. Karma whore, karma farmer, Aunt Susan, go back to Facebook, stay on your side of the pond. Writing them down felt like touching a bruise. I hesitated on Aunt Susan the longest because it felt personal in a way the others did not. It felt like being laughed at in a room I had wanted to belong to. I wrote that I was sorry, not sorry for being new, not sorry for trying to learn, but sorry for the way my frantic posting had looked and the way it had affected other people's experience. I wrote that I had not understood the unwritten rules and I had pushed too hard. I did not beg, but I asked for patience in the simplest way I could. I wrote that I would slow down and stop chasing the number like it was the only thing that mattered. I stared at the apology line for a long time, wondering if it would make me look weaker. Then I realized I already felt weak. Pretending otherwise had only made the fall worse. At the end of the post, I added one more thing because I could not stop myself. I wrote that I still wanted to win the bet, but I wanted to do it without turning into someone I did not recognize. I wrote that if people wanted, I could keep them updated, not with constant posts everywhere, but with occasional honest ones about how it was going. I did not know if that was a good idea. It felt like offering my neck after being bitten, but it also felt like taking control, like choosing the shape of the story instead of hiding from it. My thumb hovered over the button to post. I imagined the replies arriving like stones. I imagined laughter. I imagined people quoting my words back to me in a mocking voice. I also imagined, faintly, someone saying they understood. Someone saying, "Slow down, you will be fine." I did not know which would hurt more. I hit post. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The screen sat there with my confession, exposed and permanent. My chest felt empty, like I had stepped out into cold air without a coat. Then the first notification appeared, and the number beside it started to climb. I looked at it and felt a strange calm, not relief, not excitement, just a clear realization. Once you confessed online, you did not control the verdict. I watched the comments arrive under my confession like a tide changing direction in the dark. The first ones came slow, then faster, until my phone warmed in my hand. I stayed on the same screen, refreshing without meaning to, feeling like I had walked onto a stage and the lights had snapped on. Some people replied like they had been waiting for this moment, not to help me, but to judge the motive I had admitted to. They did not care about Canada. They did not care about my friend. They saw one thing, and that one thing made them angry. That was the first camp I noticed, the anti-karma farming crowd. They acted like karma chasing was a kind of pollution. They explained, with blunt certainty, that posting for points clogged feeds and pushed down posts from people who actually needed help or had something real to say. They said it rewarded shallow content, quick jokes, copy and paste stories, anything that could win a fast reaction. They warned that it trained people to manipulate strangers instead of joining a community. They described the platform like a town square that only worked if people spoke for the right reasons. What unsettled me was how calm some of them sounded. They did not insult my looks or my intelligence. They spoke like rule keepers, like they were protecting a fragile system. They treated my intent as the problem, not my personality. It was almost worse because it made me feel like I had done damage without meaning to. I read those replies and felt my earlier defensiveness rise again. In my head, I argued back. The site was literally built on points. The buttons were right there. If nobody was meant to care, why was the scoreboard so visible? But I did not type that. I could feel how quickly a single defensive sentence could turn the thread into a fight, and I already felt outnumbered. Then a different kind of voice appeared. It did not excuse me, but it did not attack me either. This was the second camp, the newcomer education crowd. They told me I had done something common and human. They said everyone arrived clueless, and most people learned by making mistakes. They pointed out that the platform had unwritten norms that were hard to see until someone punished you for breaking them. They explained that posting too fast across too many places looked like spam, even if it was not meant that way. They suggested I slow down, read more, comment more than I posted, and stick to a few communities until I understood the tone. A few of them sounded tired, like they had given the same advice many times to many people. But they still gave it. They separated learning from exploitation. They treated me like a real person who had stumbled, not a villain who had invaded their space. Those replies hit me in a strange place. They made me want to cry, not because they were emotional, but because they made room for me to be imperfect without being thrown away. I had not realized how hard I had been bracing for rejection until someone offered instruction instead of ridicule. But the thread did not settle into one mood. It split and split again, as if my confession had given everyone permission to say what they already believed about the platform and the kind of people they wanted on it. That was when the third camp got loud, the gatekeepers. They did not argue about spam or content quality. They argued about belonging. They treated Reddit like a private club, and they spoke like bouncers. They mocked the idea of a grown woman chasing karma for a trip. They joked about Facebook and implied that people like me brought a certain kind of attention seeking, a certain kind of wholesome storytelling, a certain kind of obvious emotion that they considered embarrassing. They leaned on stereotypes. They painted me as someone who shared too much, who posted like she was collecting likes, who did not understand the culture. Some of them used my location like a weapon, as if being English made me an intruder by default. The message underneath, it all felt simple and ugly. This place was not for you. I felt my face heat as I read those, even alone in my kitchen. I could handle criticism about my behavior, but being told I did not belong anywhere, not because of what I did, but because of who they decided I was, opened an old fear I did not like to admit existed. I kept scrolling and realized there were more camps than I had expected. People were not just reacting to me. They were using me as a test case for their own rules. The fourth camp surprised me because it was pure support, almost protective. These commenters talked about how easy it was to get pulled into numbers. They compared it to any other scoreboard, any other feedback loop, and they said the feeling I described was familiar. They encouraged me to step back from the app and remember it was meant to be fun. They told me to ignore the cruel voices, to block people who targeted me, to stop rereading insults like they held truth. They said the names were meant to shrink me. They said I should not let strangers decide my identity. That camp should have made me feel safe, but it also made me uneasy. Their kindness felt like a blanket over a fire. It softened the moment without changing the fact that I had been drifting into obsession. I worried that if I accepted comfort too easily, I would go right back to chasing the number, just with a nicer story about it. The fifth camp made my stomach drop again, because they treated my confession itself as a tactic. They said the post was just another way to farm karma. Only now I was farming sympathy. They claimed I had staged the whole thing, that the bet was a lie, that my apology was a performance designed to pull in upvotes from people who liked redemption stories. They pointed out that even negative attention drove engagement, and engagement drove karma. They accused me of being smarter than I pretended, of knowing exactly how to push buttons. I read those and felt a cold, helpless frustration. I could not prove what was in my head. I could not attach my real face to my words without risking something else. The more I insisted I was sincere, the more manipulative I could look. It felt like a trap built out of doubt. The sixth camp sounded like they had read the rules with a highlighter. They spoke about moderation, spam filters, and how fast posting triggered automated removals. They warned me that if I continued, I could get shadowed or banned in certain places without even being told why. They told me to stop reposting, to avoid low-effort content, to check whether a community allowed questions, selfies, personal updates, or anything that looked like diary writing. They explained that karma was not a prize you grabbed, but a side effect of fitting into a place. That camp did not feel friendly, but it did feel useful. It also made the platform seem colder than I had realized. I had thought I was arguing with people. Now, I pictured invisible systems watching me too, measuring my behavior like a machine, deciding whether I belonged. A seventh camp appeared in smaller bursts, and it was almost comical compared to the others. These people focused on the bed itself. They treated it like a sport. They asked how much karma Mr. X had. They asked how close I was. They offered strategies, lists of popular communities, and advice on what types of posts tended to rise quickly. Some of them cheered for the Canada trip as if it was a prize in a contest show. They told me not to quit now, not when I had momentum. I felt a sharp tug reading those, because they spoke directly to the part of me that had started this. The competitive part. The part that liked the chase. Their comments sounded like permission to keep going. And that frightened me, because I could feel how easily my apology could turn into a new phase of the same obsession. Only now the crowd was coaching me. As I kept reading, I started sorting voices in my head without meaning to. Like a courtroom where the jury could not agree on what crime had been committed. Some people said the harm was the clogging of feeds. Some said the harm was the cruelty of the crowd. Some said the harm was my own spiraling need for approval. Some said there was no harm at all, only thin-skinned gatekeepers who wanted to feel superior. Every comment seemed to carry a different definition of what Reddit was supposed to be. Same posts, same behavior, very different judgments. I tried to hold on to my own intent, the simple truth I had typed in the confession, but even that began to wobble under the pressure of so many eyes. I started questioning my motives again. Had I really just wanted to win a trip, or had I wanted strangers to clap for me because I did not feel brave in real life? Had I been learning, or had I been grabbing? I noticed my breathing change as I read, shorter, higher in my chest. The same physical reaction I had felt on the train when the insults first hit. The thread had turned into a living thing, and I had put my hands inside it. Then the replies began to shift in a way I had not expected. A few people stopped talking about me and started talking about him. At first, it was only a hint, a sideways remark about how a friend should not set a trap like that. Then I saw more of it, growing between the arguments about karma and culture, and the shape of a new camp formed. They did not blame the platform. They did not even blame my posting. They blamed Mr. X. Once I noticed people blaming Mr. X, I could not unsee it. The thread stopped being only about my posts and started being about the force behind them. It felt like someone had turned the lights and pointed them away from me, and for a moment I breathed easier. Then the fear returned, sharper, because Mr. X was real. He was not a faceless crowd. He was my best friend. This was a new camp, and it gathered fast. They did not talk about algorithms or subreddits. They talked about social pressure. They said the bet itself had been the spark. They argued that turning karma into a prize turned a community into a scoreboard. They said competition warped behavior in a predictable way, especially for someone new who did not know the rhythm yet. Some suggested he had set me up, even if he did not mean to. Not in an evil way, but in a careless way. They said it was easy for someone with an old account to challenge a newcomer, because the newcomer would try to sprint through a marathon. As I read those replies, my stomach tightened, because they described my last 3 weeks with uncomfortable accuracy. I had not started Reddit to join conversations. I had started it to win. I had treated people like a crowd I needed to please, not like individuals I could talk to. I had not said that out loud before, but seeing strangers say it made it feel undeniable. They also said something that stung in a different place. They implied he might have enjoyed watching me struggle, like it was entertainment, like I was a toy wound up to run until I hit a wall. I wanted to defend him immediately, even in my own head. Mr. X had always teased me, but it had never felt cruel. He had been confident, yes, and sometimes smug, but he had also listened to me in ways most people never had. He had shown up again and again without asking for anything romantic, without turning kindness into a debt. He had been steady, and yet the thread planted a seed I did not want. Not that he had wanted to hurt me, but that he might not have understood what it meant to throw me into this kind of public arena and call it fun. I scrolled again, and I saw another camp push back against that. This one felt colder, like a hand on my shoulder that was not meant to comfort. They said I could not put it on him. They said no bet forced my thumb to hit post. They said I was an adult, not a child, and I had chosen to chase a number until it controlled my mood. They pointed out that intent did not erase impact. Even if I meant well, the feed still got filled, other users still got annoyed, and my apology did not undo what I had already done. They did not tell me to leave. They told me to change. They said if I really understood, I would slow down. I would participate normally. I would stop making everything about my own score. They argued that my confession only mattered if my behavior changed after it. Otherwise, it was just words. That camp made me feel defensive again, but it was a quieter defensiveness because it did not feel like an attack. It felt like a demand for honesty. It forced me to look at the part of myself that wanted forgiveness without discomfort. I realized I wanted the thread to end with a neat conclusion, like a judge's decision. Good person, bad person, allowed, banned. But real life did not work that way, and neither did Reddit. Then there was a third wave that cut through everything else, and it made my chest ache. They said the name calling had been the real wrongdoing. They said criticism could be firm without being cruel. They said it was one thing to tell someone they were posting too much, and another to reduce them to a stereotype and laugh. They pointed out that telling a person to leave a platform or to go back where they came from was not guidance. It was bullying dressed as culture. They argued that even if I had been annoying, it did not justify people piling on like a pack. reading that made my throat burn because it validated the part of me that had felt small and exposed on the train. I had tried to tell myself it was only the internet, but those replies reminded me that words still landed. Being pushed out still hurt, even if it happened through a screen. At the same time, that camp scared me too, because I could feel how easy it would be to hide behind it. To tell myself the only problem was the cruelty, so I did not have to look at my own choices. I did not want to become someone who used the worst commenters as an excuse to ignore fair criticism. The thread kept moving, and then I saw another camp that felt almost careless, like they were watching the whole thing with a smirk. They said everyone needed to lighten up. They said karma was meaningless entertainment, and people who acted like guardians of purity were being dramatic. They argued that posting often was allowed, and if people did not like it, they could scroll past. They claimed the outrage was performative, like a ritual where people proved they belonged by shamming someone else. That camp made my head spin because it offered a tempting escape. If nothing mattered, then I could keep doing what I wanted. I could keep chasing the number and call anyone who complained overly serious. I could treat the whole thing like sport again, but I could not fully believe it because my body had already proved it mattered to me. I had felt the shame in my skin. I had felt my breathing change. I had felt the panic of being watched. If karma was meaningless, why had it taken over my life so fast? I kept reading until the words started to blur, and I began to see the verdict I had been searching for was not a single answer. It was a storm of values crashing into each other. Some people wanted Reddit to feel like a curated space, protected from shallow content. Some wanted it to be a place where newcomers were taught, not punished. Some wanted it to be a private club, and they used ridicule to defend the door. Some believed the bet had set a trap. Some believed none of that mattered because I still made my own choices. Some believed the cruelty was the only real issue. Some believed the whole thing was a joke that had been taken too seriously. Each camp sounded certain. Each camp sounded like the obvious truth to the person writing it. And my name sat in the middle like a target pinned to a wall. I realized something else as I watched the thread. The crowd was not one mind. It was a collection of people using my confession as a mirror. They saw what they already feared. They saw what they already hated. They saw what they already defended. And the most unsettling part was how quickly the crowd could switch roles. The same user could tell me to stop spamming, then tell someone else to stop bullying me. The same person could explain community norms kindly, then make a joke at my expense. It was not consistent. It was not fair. It was human, but amplified by distance and speed. I thought about Mr. X again, and the fear returned like a wave. If strangers thought he was to blame, what did that mean for us? If I brought him into this thread, would they turn on him too? And if I did not tell him, would that be a betrayal? My friendship suddenly felt like it stood near a fire I had started by accident. I picked up my phone and opened our chat. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I imagined writing, "This got out of hand." I imagined his reply, something light, something confident, something meant to calm me. I also imagined him being offended because he took pride in his Reddit life. I imagined him telling me I was overreacting. I imagined myself snapping back because I felt raw and cornered. I closed the chat without typing. Then I looked back at my confession post and watched the numbers rise and fall. Upvotes came in like small nods. Downvotes came in like someone turning their back. Even after everything I had written, even after all the speeches about meaninglessness and community health, my brain still tracked the score. That was the part that frightened me most. Not the gatekeepers, not the cruelty, not even the embarrassment. It was the fact that I could confess, apologize, and still feel the pull of the number like a hook under the skin. I leaned back in my chair and tried to feel the room around me. The quiet kitchen, the dark window, the hum of the fridge, normal life waiting for me to return to it. And yet my attention kept sliding back to the screen, back to the verdict I could not control. My confession had not ended the trial. It had only opened it wider. I understood then that there would be no single clear judgment to save me. The crowd would not agree on what I was. They would not agree on what I had done. They would not agree on what I deserved. And because of that, the only verdict that mattered would have to come from me. But I did not know what mine was yet. I stared at the app icon, feeling the old urge to post something else, to steer the mood, to prove I belonged. I felt a second urge, quieter but heavier, to stop and let the silence sit, even if it felt like losing. With Canada still hanging in the air, with my pride bruised, and with strangers still watching, I had to decide what happened next. Did I keep chasing karma, or did I redefine why I was here at all? The next morning, I went back onto the train with my phone turned face down in my coat pocket. I still felt it there like a weight, even when it stayed silent. The carriage smelled of damp wool and coffee, and the windows held a gray reflection of everyone sitting in their own private worlds. For the first time in weeks, I did not open Reddit the moment I sat down. I watched the fields slide past and tried to remember what my mind sounded like before the bet. In real life, I had always been quiet. I listened more than I spoke. I did not fight for attention in a room. I waited to be invited in. Online, I had done the opposite. I had pushed my way into spaces I did not understand, and I had treated the reaction like a scoreboard. The strange part was how natural it had felt once I started. The app had not forced me, but it had offered me an easy measurement. I did not have to guess if people liked me. I could see it in numbers, up or down, win or lose. I thought about the names again, and I felt that familiar sting. Aunt Susan, Karma Farmer, go back to Facebook. Stay on your side of the pond. None of them had described my real life. They had described a character strangers had built out of my posting pattern. And the worst part was that I had started to move like that character, trying to beat the accusations by posting more, apologizing harder, explaining myself louder. I had always believed I was too reserved to be that kind of person. The last few weeks proved I had been wrong. It was never only about karma. It was about being seen. That realization made me feel exposed in a different way. Because if I had been chasing being seen, then the Canada trip was not the whole prize. Canada had been the excuse that sounded respectable. It was a dream I could tell myself I deserved, because it was about travel and adventure and doing something brave. But beneath it, there had been something smaller and more needy. I wanted proof that I could matter somewhere. I wanted to win in front of an audience. The train rocked gently over the tracks, and I focused on my breathing, slow and even, like I was trying to calm an animal. I replayed the comment camps in my head, not their words, but what they represented. One group wanted to protect the platform from manipulation. Another wanted to teach newcomers without cruelty. Another wanted to gatekeep and laugh people out of the room. Another blamed the bet. Another blamed me. Another said harassment was the real offense. Another told everyone to lighten up. They could not all be right at the same time, yet each one spoke with total certainty. That was what frightened me most about crowds online. Not that they disagreed, but that they could turn a person into a lesson so quickly. They did not need to know my face to decide what I stood for. I stared at my own reflection in the dark glass and tried to separate what was true from what was loud. The true parts were uncomfortable. I had posted frantically. I had watched the numbers too closely. I had shaped my behavior around approval. My apology had been honest, but honesty did not automatically fix anything. The other true part was just as important. The insults had still been cruel. The jokes about belonging had still been a way to police a space through shame. Two things could be true at once, and the internet rarely allowed that without trying to pick a side. I thought about Mr. X, and my chest tightened again. I had not told him what happened yet. I had not told him strangers were blaming him for the bet. I had not told him I was being reduced to a stereotype and laughed at. I pictured him in his confident way, thinking it was all light fun, waiting for me to brag about how quickly I was climbing. I pictured the moment I would have to admit I had been knocked down. The friendship mattered more than the points. That was what I told myself, and I believed it. But I also knew pride could poison even the best friendship if it sat there unspoken. If I kept hiding this, it would not stay small. It would grow into resentment, or embarrassment, or a quiet distance that neither of us named. I finally took my phone out and looked at it without unlocking it. The screen stayed dark. No new hits, no new verdicts, just my own reflection again. I tried to imagine a healthier goal, something that was not built on a scoreboard. I could slow down and read more than I posted. I could choose a few communities and learn their tone instead of jumping everywhere. I could stop treating strangers like judges and start treating them like people. I could decide that winning the bet did not have to mean winning the internet. But the urge did not disappear just because I named it. It sat there, patient, waiting for me to get bored or lonely, waiting for a moment of weakness. When the train approached my stop, I unlocked my phone and hovered over Mr. X's chat. My thumb trembled slightly, the same way it had trembled over the post button the night before. A message could change everything, or it could make it worse. I still did not know what I was going to do next, and that uncertainty felt like standing on the edge of a platform while something rushed past. If you had been me, would you have stopped posting, changed how you posted, or ignored the crowd completely? Share what you thought and what you believed made someone belong online. Because as I stood and the doors opened, my screen lit up with his name, and I realized I was not ready for whatever he was about to say.